All right. Good morning to those of you listening from Taiwan, and good afternoon and good evening to those of you in the West. I'm your moderator, Christopher Teng Balmaseda, and on behalf of Infinio Capital and our sponsors, I'd like to welcome you to the Taiwan NewSpace Forum, opportunities for Taiwan to participate in the global new space industry, sponsored by the Board of Science and Technology, Executive Yuan, Taiwan, and organized by the Industrial Development Bureau, Ministry of Economic Affairs, Taiwan, and hosted by the Industrial Technology Development Institute and Infinio Capital, an early-stage venture capital firm investing in startups at the intersection of deep tech, information technology, and aerospace. So it's an exciting time for space. Private companies are sending astronauts to the space station, billionaires are racing to Mars, and space tourism is now a thing. Captain Kirk has boldly gone where no 90-year-old has gone before. Innovation and investment in space and space-enabled technologies has taken a huge leap in the last decade. Projects that were once only undertaken by countries and governments are now primarily spearheaded by private companies. Today, we'll have two fireside chats with experienced industry experts and investors who will discuss technologies and innovations that are on the horizon, where they think the industry is going, and the role Taiwan can play in the global space supply chain. So during our chat, I encourage all members of the audience to ask questions in the WebEx chat. Our moderators will work hard to get your questions to me, and those will be addressed at the end of each section during a Q&A session. If you wish to contact any of the speakers, you can scan the QR code that's in their background, and that leads straight to their LinkedIn profile. So let's get started. Our first topic is entry opportunities and challenges into the new space equipment supply chain. Let's welcome to the stage Mina Mitry, co-founder and CEO of Kepler Communications in Toronto, Canada. Shanti Rao, Senior Vice President, Asia Pacific of Laser Light Communications, calling from Los Angeles. And Simon Xu, General Partner at ID SoftCapital, calling in from Taipei. Thank you all for coming in from all around the world, and make sure to unmute your microphones now that you're on the stage if you haven't done so. So we're all really excited to have you here and listen to the insights you have to offer. So let's get started. Is everyone here?
Chris?
Microphone check? Great. All right, let's start with Mina, but feel free, everybody, this is a chat, a fireside chat, so jump in if you have any comments. So Mina from Kepler, you guys have just closed a $60 million B round. You seem to be ramping up at a rapid pace, hiring the CEO from Blue Origin, Stephen Bennett. You've launched your Gen 2 satellite program to support your Ether next generation service. So tell us a bit about your strategic direction with these announcements and your views on the future.
Thanks so much for having me here, and it's really a pleasure to get to chat with these folks on the call here today. Apologies if I've got a bit of background noise, and hopefully that doesn't muffle the discussion we have. So just starting out, Kepler is a business, and the primary mission that we designed the business around is providing communications outside of Earth. So this incredible influx of assets, people, and things that are taking advantage of space, we recognize at Kepler the need to bring internet access outside of Earth, and that's the mission that we're fundamentally doing. So we're serving telecommunications to all these people, things, and assets that are flying outside of Earth, where there's an incredible influx of them that are taking place here and now. So that kind of sets the tone as well for our strategic direction here at Kepler. We're really prioritizing what we've recently announced that's called Ether. It's a program that's being led to provide real-time, always-on communications for anything that flies near Earth orbit. So whether it's an imaging satellite that's going out to near Earth orbit, or a synthetic aperture radar satellite, or a human space mission, they'll be able to use our network of small spacecraft to communicate with Earth and with each other in real time, where today we've traditionally had government-led alternatives that are largely being retired by the European Space Agency and NASA as an organization. So we're really looking forward to bridging this gap of telecommunication that exists outside of Earth. And certainly what you'll see from Kepler over the next little bit is rampant growth of our Generation 2 satellites. So that's our next generation spacecraft platform that we're using to deliver on our in-space communications network. So it's built on all the flight heritage and experience we've built in the last 15 satellites we've launched from our Generation 1 program. And we're really looking to lean on the different resources from partners all around the world that can help us to realize this program, whether that can be supporting any of our supply chain issues. I'm happy to talk a bunch about that, or really leveraging expertise internationally for the ramp up of production, moving from single satellites to tens of satellites. Certainly an incredible challenge that we've lived through, and would really welcome the opportunity for partners to help us out in expanding the scale and scope of our constellation, where the goal is to reach 140 satellites into operation by 2024.
So you're talking about communications outside of Earth. What's the growth opportunity in that? Where do you see it?
Yeah, so a really good proxy example here is we find oftentimes people are spending the same amount dollar-wise on launch as they are spending dollar-wise on telecommunications for a defined space mission. So if you take a look at the 5-year life of any space asset or a 10-year life, depending on what the mission looks like, what people have spent on launch initially is pretty equal to what they'll spend over the lifetime of that mission for telecommunications. So the launch industry is a great proxy to look at. Today, the launch industry is about $10 billion, looking to grow to about $30 billion a year by 2027. So that's a really good estimate of what the satellite in-space communications market looks like. And it's spread across the mix. It's commercial missions that want to be able to relay information in real time. It's NASA missions that are looking for a commercial alternative, and a whole host of different capabilities that, today we can't predict, but as soon as the internet access is available to them outside of Earth, we'll recognize all these capabilities and new opportunities that come online, similar to all the digital infrastructure and the slew of our digital economy that we've seen as soon as we put up our cellular tower network. And that's the analogy we use outside of Earth, but there's certainly a significant demand known here and now that's very similar to what the launch demand looks like over the next 10 years.
Wow, so communication spend is just as big as launch. That's pretty amazing and unexpected. So while we're on communication, Shanti, I've heard of Laser Light Communications. It seems kind of like a stealth company out of DARPA. Tell us a little bit about it.
It is absolutely still quite stealthy. So back in the 1990s, there was a DoD program called the Transformational Satellite that investigated how to do fast, cheap network communications. And so this is taking that technology forward. We asked ourselves, what's the cheapest way to move bits around the Earth? And our belief is that backhaul, which is like the opposite of what Mina is doing. He's doing real-time communications. We're trying to do the everything else. Backhaul between data centers is a real pain point. If you want to move your library of Netflix videos around the world so that you can get the Great British Baking Show on time, and TikTok needs to deliver cat videos all over the world, for everybody to be connected seamlessly to all this digital content, it needs to be staged close to them, which means petabytes and petabytes need to move around the world. So can you cue up the video? We have a little demonstration of how what Laserlight is building is a hybrid network of fiber optic cable on the Earth, undersea, and free space to a string of satellites in medium Earth orbit. We have if there's a video we can queue up, it'll show how we're building a network that adapts and constantly adjusts to move data around. So we have a dozen satellites here around the equator, and they're all talking to each other. And then see all those little nodes, those represent the ground stations on Earth. Initially, we want to build 150 of them. We expect that over the next 7 years or so, there will be a need for maybe 500 total globally. Now, the important thing is optical comm to Earth suffers in weather. So that's why it's a hybrid network of satellites and fiber that we are either leasing or building in order to connect those ground stations. So if it's cloudy in Taipei, instead we can downlink to Tokyo and then go over an undersea cable. From the point of view of the end user, like you don't care what we're doing. You just say, I need to move this petabyte, this terabyte over there. And laser light communications will have the lowest cost per terabyte anywhere in the world. It's not even cost per mile anymore. It's just put it somewhere and we'll take care of it. Now you saw those ground stations. There's a lot of those to build. And there's a lot of opportunity for devices and data centers to be built around the world to connect into this network.
Okay, so your system kind of complements the terrestrial and undersea fiber optic networks. So what is the advantage with all these huge investments? You said it's going to be cheaper, faster.
Yeah, well, you can imagine that at some point, the amount of data that people move around is going to exceed what's currently installed in undersea fiber, right? Because Moore's law keeps going, and every new person who gets on the internet wants to make a video and be a YouTube star. So, but
So
more
how much faster are we talking?
Yeah, it costs like $100,000 to $1 million to build a mile of cable. So solving that once and for all from space is more cost effective. The upfront capital is a little higher for sure, but that's why we are raising money to do that. That's what laser light's all about, is solving that problem. And cat videos notwithstanding, I think it's more important to say that we're focusing on bringing the whole world online, including Africa as one of our target markets to start with. Laser light will bring them cat videos, but also access to eBay, Alibaba, Etsy, the global marketplace.
And with Mina's network, even from the moon or Mars, access to Etsy. Great. So do we have Simon on? Is his mic on? I think we're having some technical difficulties.
Hi, Simon.
Simon's on mute right now. Hello, Simon.
Yeah. So okay, everybody
great.
Can hear
we
me?
Have you. Okay, so last month, President Tsai earmarked over $900 million to, quote, secure a strategic position in the supply chain for Taiwan. Looking at Shanti's and Mina's projects, they're talking about satellites or talking about ground stations. Where do you think Taiwan fits in that supply chain?
Okay, thank you. I thought I have to explain why I can represent Taiwan to promote our supply chain service to you guys. ID SoftCapital, I come from ID SoftCapital. ID SoftCapital actually is Acer's affiliate. It's also created and founded by Stanshi, Acer's chairman and founders. So we are a very important investment arm actually to co-work with Acer Pan-Acer group members like Acer, Wistron, BenQ, and AUO, the panel makers. So about the questions, I thought usually everybody say, hey, when we mention about Taiwan supply chain, we mention about OD and the EMS, but no, today I want to touch these issues. I thought 3 different kinds of uniqueness I want to share with you guys for Taiwan in the future. We try to in this new industry to play some rule, and the first one I thought is a long lead time pass. I thought it's virtually important for this industry. So when I mentioned about long lead time pass, for example, compound semiconductors or optical components like a lens or a battery, those kinds of long lead time parts, we try to build out those kinds of capability and the resources to help our customers to well control your schedule. The second one, I thought many foreigners, you didn't understand that in past 20 years, Taiwan, we also build out some very uniqueness software capability and the protocol. For example, we have a very unique LoRa that is we call Super Taiwan LoRa. That's a spatial LoRa protocol dedicated for the long distance, especially from air to ground or even space to ground, and with high cybersecurity capability. Those kinds of unique protocol. And we also have our ground satellite management systems to control, to manage satellites and the drone system around the world. And you know that we own the source code, and we can transfer those kinds of source code to our partners. Then the finally that I thought we try to build our system integration capabilities, not only subsystems but also the whole satellite integration systems to provide the design service for our customers. Then finally, I thought not. I just mentioned about the technical issue, but to be honest, I thought the most important for our global potential customers is Taiwan's culture. You know, every time when we discuss with global customers, you know, per my experience that everybody worry about, especially in the past when you engage or co-work with mainland China's players, you thought you just teach a copycat, and then later on they will become your competitors. But you know, in Taiwan, we never done that. You can look at our histories, right? No matter Apple, Amazon, Cisco, any big giants, they co-work with Taiwan from day one. Taiwan, we just play our role to serve our customer and the partners. So we never become your new competitor. So we are the partnership. We have a very good partnership. So that's Taiwan's culture. We have high loyalty. So if you want to, so actually we try to copy our successful experience in ICT and the semiconductor industry to satellites. So we want to build out the whole ecosystem to co-work with, to back up our end customers. So roughly that's our governments try to why they set up those kinds of strategy and positions. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so Shanti and Mina, what are kind of, I know you're both actively talking to Taiwanese manufacturers. What are kind of the things, the low-hanging fruit that you're looking at now, and where do you want Taiwan to go that could complement what you're doing?
Mina, you want to go first?
Yeah, either of you.
After you, Shanti.
All right. So I believe that if a bunch of high school students can make spacecraft, then so can Taiwanese industry. And you can probably do it really because you just everything you described. You have very special manufacturing capabilities, you have software, and you're building your system integration capabilities. So why are we talking to Taiwan is we're out the same reason everyone else comes to Taiwan. It's like you make good stuff and you make it on time and on budget, and we want you to be good partners. There's a lot of money to be made in space communications, and Taiwan as a manufacturer today is in the right place to move into being a system integrator and move up the food chain. So we're hoping that in addition to making what we need, you'll take all that innovation you bring into software and keep making the product better. Because there are more smart people in Taiwanese industry than there are in my house. And I want to bring all of that talent to bear on this problem.
Okay. Anything to add, Mina?
No, and I completely agree with the points that Shanti raised here. The only other contribution I might add is there's a certain aspect of economies of scale that Taiwan has built a great experience around. So how do we work to developing systems that scale economics that will be super valuable to the business partners. And then the last part of it is purely, being able to scale quickly. So from the perspective that I come from, the ability to go from one to many in a very short time period is incredibly important. And it helps to build the network pretty significantly. And so those are the two additional attributes I'd probably love to be able to leverage from Taiwanese partners.
And so you've both worked with Taiwanese partners. What have you seen as some of the challenges? Clearly Taiwan's great at semiconductor. They're great at hardware. They make lots of laptops. They make lots of computers and hardware, but they don't have much space heritage. What are kind of the steps Taiwan needs to take to really integrate into this aerospace supply chain? It feels like they have the skills, but not really the, I guess, the methodology.
So I see a really interesting question in the chat asking about COTS. Do we see space systems becoming commercial off-the-shelf things? I think we're in the right place now to change how we do manufacturing. Right now, today, if I go to one of the traditional aerospace companies and I buy a thing, they can make one of it. And then if I ask for another one, they make another one. And if I ask them to make 1 million, they can make 1 million. But if I ask them for 100, they can't do that. No one can do that. We have an opportunity to rethink how we do manufacturing, because the quality that goes into spacecraft, right, it's real. You do not simply hope that 80% of your welds are good. The design for manufacturing needs to have digital quality assurance and real-time feedback in how we assemble these things. We're at the right place now where we can build that in from the get-go as we teach Taiwan how to set up a prime contractor and system integrator. It's manufacturing 4.0, right? It's a whole new approach, and this is my laboratory for doing it.
And so you were talking about moving up the value chain. What do you mean by that?
Oh, well, it's like Mina was saying, people spend a third of the cost on launch, and then a third of the cost on the satellite, and then another third on the communications and support after the mission starts. You're not just going to sell me parts. You're going to service and maintain, and you're going to receive recurring revenue for decades. The longer it lasts, the higher the quality, the more money you make. So we used to do manufacturing where I have quality control and provisions and ISO 9000, and you guarantee that when it's delivered, it works. And sometimes it doesn't work. I want the incentives to be there so that when it works really well, you make a lot of money and I make a lot of money. And the customer is really happy because, none of us are the end customer is the guy with the cat videos. He just wants his cat videos. So when the cat videos arrive, the long-term service and support, which is really where you get the flywheel of innovation that drives the next better product, that is in everyone's interests to make good products.
And so, Simon, you come from the investment arm from Acer. Why are you interested in space? It's huge around the world. Everyone is looking at everyone going to space. Billionaires racing to be the first one, in the lower atmosphere. But most Taiwanese investors don't look at space. Why are you different than the rest? And what's your motivation?
Yeah, actually, I had, besides Acer, I also used to work for Foxconn. If I still in Foxconn, to be honest, right now I will focus my investment arm into electronic vehicle, especially electronic cars, instead of satellite. But in Acer, we have a total different viewpoint because if you look at the history of personal computer, from mainframes to server room, then become the personal computer. Without in satellite this industry, it will happen again. So don't forget that, you know, ASUS, we lead the old Taiwan supply chain to disrupt the game rules of all ICT industry. So we want to do that again. So so first of all, I want to share you guys that we truly believe that from a mainframe to personal computer will happen again in the space. The second one is, you know, because we have those kinds of dream. For Taiwan, most of EMS or ODM company, if the business scale is not big enough, they won't jump into this pool. But Stanshi, ASUS founder, no, and his son Maverick Shi, they thought no, they have to co-work with our partner from day one. That's their belief. So that's why we try to dig out. Actually, we in past 20 years, we have invested. I just mentioned the Super Tyra. The Super Tyra is very unique LoRa's protocol. We invest in more than 10 years. So that's why for us right now, business scale is not big enough. It's not an issue for us because we believe in the future that was between.
And so, Mina, you're from Canada. You're doing your program over there. I used to live in Toronto myself. You have issues with ITAR when you're sourcing different products for space. How do you kind of get around those? And for Taiwan, you know, obviously they'll first focus on less sensitive products, but how does Taiwan get into, you know, those ITAR restricted technologies?
So usually the ITAR issues we would face is in the event that we're looking to source a set of technologies from the U.S. to supply into our spacecraft process or our program. And, you know, that list is pretty exhaustive in terms of what it covers. So there is an incentive for us to source outside of the U.S. to avoid coverage under the ITAR program. And there's, you know, a bit of difference between sourcing goods and components versus providing services or telecommunication services or provisioning those types of telecommunication services. And certainly there can be a bit of a firewall between those two. So we do our best actually to source as much as we can outside of the U.S. to avoid any potential ITAR restrictions. We do our best to make sure that we've got appropriate delineations between the services we provide and the goods that we hold. And the services then can be restricted and support specific U.S. government users. And certainly just that creates some great opportunity within Taiwan. So, you know, being the alternative source or supply for goods that might otherwise be ITAR controlled really opens up the jurisdiction and boundaries or geographies that you can go out and serve with the capabilities that you build. Now, you know, we've gone through this process a little bit in terms of learning ourselves how we set up our different space programs. And I think our approach had been, you know, crawl, walk, run. So our first little bit of delivery on our space program, we didn't build anything in-house. It was all done with third-party outside suppliers. And we really leaned heavily on them to learn. And the unique advantages that we built was, you know, the intrinsic motivation of our team and the mission that we have allowed us to very quickly build up on those initial capabilities, improve on them, and go out and deliver an even better product than what we had initially learned from our prospective suppliers. And I think that's probably our unique advantage, is that learning from our mission and having that mission orientation is what allows us to build so quickly. And the other key point is certainly the crawl, walk, run approach has been very beneficial to us. So, hearing what I hear and Simon's points of view, I'd always encourage a great partnership where the early little bit of it is spending time with a set of partners that can help initialize the learning and taking that to the next and even better product, to what Shanti was talking about a little bit earlier.
I was reading, it's actually quite interesting. rather than outsource your satellite manufacturing, you built your own line and with help from University of Toronto. Where do you see vertical integration kind of essential, and where is outsourcing or partnering with other companies kind of in the cards?
Yeah, so I think it's actually context is very important in terms of those decisions, like why we made those decisions at that time, and what different decisions we would make at this time. So if you look at the global landscape of what's generally available as a high throughput manufacturing capability that'll deliver on time and on budget for satellites, there aren't really many that exist in the world. I can count them on a handful, and a lot of them aren't available for anyone else to buy. So, if you look at the factory that OneWeb built with Airbus out in Florida, that's a pretty difficult to access resource. If you look at what SpaceX did with Starlink in their program, that's an inaccessible resource, or what Planet Labs did with their program. So there isn't really an abundant capability to go out and manufacture spacecraft, and that's changing slowly with time, but it doesn't exist today. And it didn't exist certainly when we were making that decision. So our approach to this problem is, we want our team to have the right incentives. They're all incentivized by our mission, which isn't the same as most suppliers. Most suppliers are incentivized by their own need to deliver on a product or good, or maybe a government program or some other alternative, which was one reason why we decided to insource. And the second one is just like it doesn't exist. So, if there was a capability that existed out there that delivered on costs and on budget, and I could go out and say, I want 100 of these satellites delivered in a week's time or a year's time, and even with some predictability on cost and performance, that would be an incredible capability compared to anything that exists in the world today.
So Simon, on Mina's project, at what point is Taiwan at right now? And if they want to say go after 100 satellites or the 100,000 that he's going to buy next year, what is Taiwan capable of doing right now?
Okay, thanks. You know what? In terms of my experience, when I engage with global startups, usually global startup company, they will say, okay, right now maybe it's another good timing to engage with Taiwan supply chain, because right now I'm not big enough, and waiting for I'm big enough, then I will try to leverage Taiwan supply chain. I told you what, yes and no. If you look at right now current giant like Cisco, Apple, Amazon's, everyone 20 years ago from day one, they leverage Taiwan supply chain. So not like you would imagine that Apple become big enough, then they outsource their manufacturing to Taiwan. No, they co-work with Taiwan at the same one. I know that because I come from Foxconn.
So before I get to the Q&A,
Maybe
I just want to see if there are any final words or thoughts from Shanti, Mina, or Simon.
Add something to what Simon just said. Oh, go for it, Mina.
Yeah, so I was just going to also add to what Simon had mentioned. So I think I really agree with the thought process around building a bridge to help global companies engage with the Taiwan supply chain. And certainly venture capital is one avenue, but at least coming from where we've been successful and very well funded as an organization, really the priority for us is understanding capability sets, like what does exist within the Taiwan supply chain that we can leverage today to help us move faster. That's really the top priority for us. And I think building a platform that helps us to better understand what are those capabilities, what can we take advantage of, is certainly a huge area that would certainly enable us to better engage with some of these discussions. Seeing the question on vertical integration, I'd also might add that for us, it's less about vertical integration, more about aligned incentives. We want to make sure that the suppliers we work with, the supply chain we work with, is all rowing in the same direction, and they want to see mission success. That's the objective, mission success, not delivering a good on time and on budget, but we want to see mission success. So building a supply chain that's got aligned incentives is really our objective. And to solve that problem is why we currently vertically integrate. But knowing the right capabilities that are available to use and take advantage of within Taiwan, and having that accessible through a platform, and knowing that we can align incentives for the supply chain to be mission success, that would definitely go a long way to have us make different decisions at this time.
So you asked someone, there's a question like, what's in it for us if we're only building a few of these things? But new technology is just like venture capital. It's the unicorns, the few unicorns that really take off. And people often ask, well, what's NASA good for? I worked for NASA for 16 years, and people would say, like, what do you guys do for us? So one of my friends was working on the Hubble Space Telescope back in the 1980s, and they decided, you know what, we're going to need digital cameras for this. We're going to have to go invent digital cameras. We are talking today because of investments that NASA made for an astronomy mission, which is, otherwise good for pretty pictures and graduate students, but digital cameras. We gave you digital. When you try really hard things, you invent really hard things. Digital cameras, I can't promise the next invention will be the same thing, but when you work in space technology, you are working at the cutting edge, and you have the chance to build the next breakthrough.
I think GPS is another great example of a government program that created a few industries around the world, even in Taiwan, plenty of GPS utilizing companies. So I think, in the audience, there's definitely, people wondering where this can go. And it's limitless that, the sensors, the satellites, all these technologies. So let's go to the audience, unless you had another point, Shanti.
It's the little pieces. Someone asked about test and measurement. Oh my goodness, yes, there's going to be lots of test and measurement equipment. Every time in my entire career, someone said, oh, let's just skip that test. Not a good idea.
Okay, let's see some questions from the audience. All right. Someone is asking, what advice do you have for Taiwanese manufacturers who are interested in entering the provision for measurement? Oh, that's what you were talking about, vertical solutions. What are the key points and necessary conditions in this related field?
So what Simon was saying is we need that system integrator level to bring everyone together. And so it's about supply chain management. And like Mina said, what are the right capabilities and incentives? That's going to be a whole of industry thing as we all come together, and the manufacturers and the system integrators and the test and measurement houses negotiate the right way to work together so that everyone wants the mission to succeed.
Okay, another question.
Answer, but I mean, you come to the table, and we'll invite you into the room.
So I think why people don't come to the table is because they look at space as capital intensive. Is what the next question is. What kind of, I guess, government, public-private partnerships and incentives can Taiwan, come up with to kind of incentivize the global space companies and the factories to come together? They still need to take their risk to find their unicorn, but maybe ease that risk a bit. And it's an open question to everybody.
I'm not sure that space is as capital intensive as people think. So I love to talk about this whenever we present Kepler to any audience. For the cost of building a software company, we built a space business. So we're talking small dollars here relative to the space sector, but on $21 million worth of capital, we built, launched, operated, and completed a full network of 15 spacecraft. So getting engaged in the space business is not quite as capital intensive as people might think, and there's certainly quite a few avenues to get started. The incentives all have to be aligned to the same mission. I think that's probably the best incentive that you can have. So You know, Shanti mentioned this earlier. If my mission's successful, you can be super successful. That, I think, would certainly align everybody's incentives in the right way. You know, we've got to build, repair, repeat on all the work that we're doing. These are not assets that live up there for 20, 30 years like the traditional space sector. These are assets we're looking to replace on a 5 to 8 year basis.
Yeah, I'm told I have to wrap up. You know, it's been an exciting topic. It'd probably go on another hour, but we got to get to the next panel. I just want to thank all of our speakers. Thank you, Mina, Shanti, and Simon, for sharing your thoughts, your insights with the audience. And we look forward to working together, Western companies and Taiwan, and building this new global space industry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very much, Chris.
Thank you, everyone. A pleasure.